Hey guys, I'm just doing a quick tutorial on how I do my shot loaded, or how I do my BB loaded snake whip. It's going to be a mini whip. I'm tying off with artificial sinew this piece of thicker paracord. It's roughly 9 inches long, and the grip is going to be 6.5 inches. It's going to be a tiny one, but very effective whip. I've already gutted this particular paracord. As you can see, it's bigger. I need to get the right kind of size difference. I forgot exactly what size this is, but I've loaded this section up with BBs, and I'm going to use threaded rod, which I've rounded on either end, and I'll screw it in place. I left roughly a 2-inch section that is not loaded, and the rest of this is all loaded with the BBs inside it. And take my threaded rod and literally screw it in place. And because the diameter is really close to 1/4 inch on the inside, it's a nice tight fit. I literally can really crank down. I can crank down on this and make sure it's super secure on the rod, on top of tying it with sinew and tape. But this ain't coming out. See, look at that. This ain't coming out. And technically, if I really wanted to get super secure and tight on it, I can put it in pliers. I'm just doing all this by hand for speed's sake, and put it in pliers and tighten it. But I can adjust the tension that way, because if it's singed up here, they can't go anywhere. So what I've got is Sure tape. This is gaffer's tape. It's kind of like a cloth tape, more than likely equivalent to what hockey tape is, but I'm going to start wrapping from the rod, which is already tightened down, and it's putting a lot of tension on, but I'm going to wrap this entire thing down. And now as you can see, I split the tape in half because it can tear like duct tape, so that it's got 2 strips like this. And if I need more, I can always add more too. But I'm going to start it at an angle and make it really tight all the way down. And I'm going to go about 1 inch past the BB section. Keep in mind that this is a lot longer than I am going to make the whip itself. So the end result is not as I'm not really concerned about with the core, keeping it as I am, or starting out with the core length as I am with the strands that I'm going to be putting onto it in a minute. Being careful not to make any folds, so it's nice and spirally. See, if it starts to stick to itself, it's almost impossible to get it undone. So I'm keeping this from sticking to itself. And it would be better if I put it in a vise. I know my wife hates it when I work in the air. I'm trying to do this so I can show you guys. I'm going to switch out the tape. And when I switch it out, I'm careful not to overlap too much, because if I overlap too much, it'll create a bulge, which I don't want. And there you go, there's my taped core. It's kind of hard to see against the contrast of my shirt there. And it's about 1.5 inches past the BBs, where it stops. So I just gave the transition layer at the end also another layer of sinew, just wrapped it around it a few times. This is waxed artificial sinew, and I'm going to take this outside and I'm going to roll it with a weight flat piece of concrete and on my concrete, and I'll come back. All right, I got my strands cut and I marked my midpoints where I want to have the 2 longest strands. I'll put a link in the description, in the description I'll put the links that I use for the belly, and I'll start doing the belly first. For plait here, this is another term used for braiding. It's plaiting, and I found the middle point of the 5.5 foot strand, and I got 2 of those 5.5 foot strands. So what I'm going to do is left side is going under, right side is going over. I'm going to give a little bit of slack. I'm going to take the other strand and put it through here. I'm trying to watch the screen and do this at the same time. And then I'm going to find the midpoint where that knot is, and it will stop right there. I'm going to leave the knot on this side. So I got corresponding knots on either side of this rod, this steel rod. I've scooted up about 3/4 of an inch. And so the pattern, you're always looking at the bottom strand. Bottom strand is like your pointer. It's like, all right, well, this is the side you need to go first. And so it'll go around, keeping the flat wrapping around the back, under one, over one. And then the process repeats itself. Pointing at this one, okay. Under, over. Careful not to kink around when you're wrapping around the back. And you're going to do this same pattern and keep it tight. I'm pulling and pushing at the same time, keeping it tight. When you're working with leather, you like use tallow, like fat, and you can grease up your strands. But in this case, what I might do eventually is I start adding wax to this portion with my hands. But you're going to do this all the way until you run out of the belly strands. So I won't put you through that, but that's what you're going to do. And I'll start the video back up when I'm ready to do the ending transition. I got a little sculpture wax right here. It's really soft, low temperature melting wax. I thought, well, you know what, why not just show it? I'm gonna hold the flat of the paracord, the stripped paracord, and literally just pull it through, coating the outer layer of the paracord with this really sticky gummy wax. I actually use this to make jewelry out of. Yeah, see, just running it along there, creating that nice friction and it melting into it. And what this does is it already go ahead and preloads the paracord with wax mechanically versus thermally and having to soak it. And it also gives me a chance to utilize this as and get a better grip on some of these things as I'm plaiting, and I can feel the flatness and stickiness. It helps me bind it all together. You get into a rhythm with doing these plaiting. Tight, wrap around, tight, wrap around, tight, wrap around, tight, wrap around. All right, as I started to run out of my 4-plait braid here, I was dropping strands. I tied them off, and as we get down to way past the BBs here, it's tapering, but you're going to want to keep this relatively loose, just enough to bind. I started to bind it a little bit too tight here, but there's a lot of energy going on right here, so you keep it to where it's somewhat flexible there. Otherwise, you're going to get these weird kinks in the whip. And so you do that, and as you can see, the dropping and cutting is staggered. So it's not all at the same time. The BBs are right there. So this is going to be a 3-foot whip. So it's not going to be. It's going to be tapered still. And the idea is to have a nice cone shape so that it generates the force needed to crack. There we go. These are my strands cut out. I got 2 that are 8 feet, 1 that is 6 feet, 1 that's 5, and 1 that's 4. And then the 2 that are 8 feet, I did mark the center point on both, and then the other ones you stagger off of 3. Like basically, that's not the center point of this strand. I staggered it about 3 inches. So the single strands are. So in essence, you got, if it's wrapping around the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's going to be a 10-plait. Just so you can see them all hanging up here. They're doubled over. All the knots are in the middle spot. See how one strand stops at 17 inches, the other one stops at 19, the other one stops at 22, the other one stops at 25, then 32 inches, and then 36, and then these all cut off and I'll stagger. These are for the 2 8-foot ones. These are supposed to be in the middle, but as you tie your knot, it doesn't exactly get in the middle. What I'm using is waxed thread that I got from the leather store. So this is already pre-waxed thread and twine. So the idea also is to keep everything, all the strands bound nice and tight. And then as we get closer towards the end, we loosen it up. So it's a nice gradual taper as everything gets done. So this is going to be the next binding overlay before I start doing the final overlay, or the only overlay. Core and everything is the first, and then this is the second core. This is the first belly, or the only one belly in this 3-foot whip, and then the overlay, which is a 10-plait. And yeah, I'm just wrapping this around nice and tight at first, and after I pass this area here, I'll start to loosen up a little bit. And this is a technique I developed where I'm actually using, since I'm using leather stitching needles, I'm going to stitch the cable or the cord into the actual whip itself. So there is no fraying. As you can see, it can go right through the nylon. Boom. And it is stitching in as I'm going up here. I can also go underneath itself this way, and there's no coming out. Multiple places where it can actually poke through here. Technically, you don't need to do this too much, but I just like to make sure it's super secure. And it literally can just lay down after I'm done. And I'm spiraling upward as I'm stitching it until I run out of areas where I can stitch, because it's just too short. So that might have been my last. I'm gonna try to do one more. See how it has to be threaded through the eye. Let's see if I can get it underneath here. Yeah, one more. Boom. All right. And then it's a big fat sewing needle. And then this, you can just simply just lay down because it's wax. It sticks to itself. It's a wax thread. Nice. And there is my bound overlay before doing, or my bound belly. And this is two bellies, the core, and then, or I'm sorry, one belly, and over the core, and a threaded rod. And we'll get to reason why I used a threaded rod at the very end. So it's going to be cool. At this point, what I've done too is also, instead of taking it outside to do the rolling with the stone, just do this by hand on the floor here. It's a nice smooth surface. And this is just pushing down any of the excess bumps. When I learned how to do leather work, it was all done by hand. You didn't have to really use a wood surface, and you can just roll it. And so it's a nice smooth cone, and it's good to be straight right now, because the whip will take its shape after it's already first curled and cracked. So remember how we started our belly. We have 2 knots on either side of the core with the first belly. What we're going to do the same thing where we put them back to back, strands to the left, top over to the right. So we got something that looks like this. And I'm not going to be waxing these just yet. I just wanted to make sure I got a good wax layer underneath. And so what I'm trying to do is make quadrants where there's knots. And so I will turn the core here, or yeah, the core with the belly here, and I'm going to shift this knot over to where we have 1, 2, 3, 4 knots at the top. And there's a reason why. I want to make sure that that's nice and even and symmetrical. I'm not going to cut this off. And also, when we make our loop to feed our strands in, as we feed them in, we're going to find that knot. And we're going to untie that knot. So these are marker knots, mainly because, oops, I tied that one a little too tight. They're mainly because we know what is the offset. Word to the wise, don't tie your marker knots too tight. Technically, you can leave them in there, but I have a vision of what I want to do with the end result, is make it nice and neat to where we don't have to cut off the end, and we'll actually utilize the threaded rod. Okay. Messing up here. Okay, so that's loose. Not on the front, not on the back. Mark it. And technically, we probably could use like a white marker. I'm just all kinds of messed up here. Ideally, it's just offset. So I want it to stop right there. All right. And then down here, it's offset. Those two strands are offset. And then the next one. The end result, you should look something like this. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 knots around the top part of the threaded rod. You got your 4 strands, or I'm sorry, your 5 strands over here, 5 strands over here. And same thing happens when we start our wraps. The one that's on the top and the bottom is pointing over here, so you do your top one over here. And what you're gonna do is go under, under, over, under 2, over 3. That's it. All right, so repeat under 2, over 3. All right, and we'll speed this up. Next one's over here. Pick one at the top, under 2, over 3. There we go. first point where we're going to drop our first strand. See how the strand is the shortest so far out of all of them? Shortest, second shortest. So, and it's at the top. It's pointing to the top from our bottom strand pointing. This is the one to go. So it's going to go under 2, over 1, or over 3, and then that one's pointing there. Next one's going to go under 2, over 2. So this one's going to stick out. I'm sorry, over 3. We'll stick it out next. So under 2, over 3, under, oh, this one's going around, under 2, over, and then let that one stick out over these two. You see? And we'll give that a tug later on when it's there. So we'll continue on. So now it's going to be offset for a little bit. This is going to go around under 2 over 3 still. Next one under 2 over 2, since it's 4 strands on this side. We'll do the same thing when we drop this one. All right, the next strand is dropped. Now we're even again, so we're doing 8 plat. So now we drop 2 strands. So I'm gonna change the plat too. I'm gonna go under, over, under, over. No, I'm gonna go under 2, over 2 still. Still herringbone. Under 2, over 2. Just dropping strands as we go. All right, we're continuing to drop strands. I'm using my Saving Essential Oil Deep Blue for my hands. Got it in my fingers. Also getting it embedded into the whip, which is nice. Therapeutic whip. And it helps with my fingers, making sure that they do not cramp up from working them. Point where I will drop the next strand so that it's nice and even, and I'm going under 1 over 1 over here now. Leaving that sticking out. Next one, under 2 over 1. So it's going to be an odd number on one side. Under 1 over 1. Under 2 over 1. Keeping it nice and tight. Like I said, we'll tug these strands later on. They're just sticking out. Eventually to get it to where we're just 4 strands that we're plaiting. which I'll drop the next strand right around here. All right, guys, we are in the home stretch. I've just dropped the last strand before going into the 4-plat. And so it's just under one, over one. Ignore this one. Oops. Under one, over. Sorry, I'm not looking. Under, over. Might braid Ruby's hair a little bit better. Under, over. Gonna pull it nice and tight. Under, over. Under, over. Under, over. Under, over. Get nice and fast here. But the key is you do still want to take your time making sure that you don't mess up. And you still do a gradual taper towards the end when you're letting strands out. So it still makes a cone shape at the bottom. I'll stop there. So we got all of our strands sticking out. What we'll do is we'll tie this off. The last one that was there, tie it off here and go down. Next one, go around through it, cascade the knot down. Next one, around, through itself, and down the next knot below. Last one, the longest one, around and down. I have another final step to secure this end as well, but for now we'll work on getting these secured, and I'm going to roll it on the floor here. Don't need a whole lot of pressure. Just roll. 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 Pliers. Tug. sure you tug the direction that it's coming from. Tug, tug, and tug. Continue to roll. It's nice and sure. All right. Cut off about a millimeter or two away from the edge here. Take your fire and singe it. So it's nice and melty. Might have to turn off the ceiling fan. So it melts into it. I have another idea as well to secure that nylon. Using a soldering iron. All right, fire. Melt it. Tug. Fire. There. Tug. As I'm cutting, I'm actually trying to make it fray a little bit so that when it lights on fire, it burns and melts into itself. And as you can see, I'm using the shaft of the lighter. So let me just cut off here. Shaft of the lighter to roll it on there and not burn my finger. Melt, roll. There. All right. About 99% complete. Next, we're going to make the fall, which the fall is about, I'd say a good fall is about a foot and a half long for this size whip. I could technically use the core strand, but I'm not going to use the core strand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this inside itself. And so I'll take my threading needle and I'm going to find somewhere around the middle of this and thread it through like I'm putting a needle in a vein and work it through all the way to the end. All right, I'm going to disassemble this for a little bit here. I stitched the fall here, basically using the leather and the needle to stitch a loop into the original thicker paracord. I unraveled the core away from it. And what we're going to do is we're going to loop it all the way through all of these pieces to where we have this loop going around all of them, including the core. Like so. And we're going to make this hitch. Ooh. There we go. We're going to make this hitch. What we're going to do is have two on either side, two strands on either side. So it's going to be a 4-point fall hitch. And make sure that this gets pinched around. So the first strand is going to go around and loop through itself, just like what we did when we secured it. Next strand goes around all of them, around, loop through itself, those two are done. Third strand around all of it, loop through itself, and last one, the fourth one, around all of them, loop through itself and down. So this hitch, and here's where we need a pair of pliers, because each of these needs to be tightened, given a tug. And then give it a tug on your fall. Loosened up the threads here. Tighten up again. 2, 3, 4. Tighten again. Nice. Just gotta remember this thing's potentially going close to the speed of sound. You gotta make sure it's nice and tight. Technically, we can keep these going, especially the longer strands. I don't like cutting these kind of strands. Keep that hitch going down. Oh, tighter the better. At this point, we can go ahead and cut. Let's do one more. This is pretty long right here. Around. See, they're all going the same direction. Listen carefully, this is where you gotta pay attention here. I'm gonna take all these strands right here. I'm gonna bundle them together, like so. This is where my plastics knowledge comes into play. All right, you see that frayed point right there? I'm gonna melt them all together, fuse them. Get them all nice and goopy. Lay them down. Get it to where you can't tell one strand from the next. And this plastic will melt into each other. And then you can go ahead and take your core material, do the same. Cut it. Careful not to cut your fall off. All that work you just did. Melt it. It's basically like plastic welding. To where it's one piece. And there you go. All that's left to do now is attach the popper. I'm gonna cut my fall to the right length because I had too long of a piece. I'll cut it off here. Nice sharp edge there. Again, melting, bonding, melt, bond, melt, bond. All right, now I can use this same waxed thread as a popper material. It doesn't have to be too complicated. This is where people complicate things a lot. I did one piece, doubled it over, and I'm going to, this is about 1.5 feet long. I'm gonna twist it. Twisting with my fingers, at the same time putting some tension on it. If anybody's ever twisted wire or cable, you know that if you twist too much, it begins to kink. And you're gonna want it to kink because that will become your loop. All right, so you see in this, now I'm gonna start to loosen up the slack, and there. There's my loop. Magic. And on this end, I'm going to tie a knot so it keeps that kink in there. And this is what will break the sound barrier. And because it's uneven, easy fix, cut it. And so this wax thread is nice and stiff, and it's made out of a durable material. And then to attach it to the whip, you go, watch closely, through itself, like so. And I'm gonna put a knot. I'm gonna start to tie a knot through it. Watch this. It's gonna go over or through that hole right there, around that piece, and then I'm going to slide it down to where it wraps around itself. And because we singed that end, there's a plastic knot at the end of this thing, so it holds on to that knot. Bam, like that. Let's go try it out. So here's our mostly complete snake whip, or mini bullwhip. Technically it's a bullwhip because it's got a handle, but the fall is attached, the popper is attached. This is his first time it's ever been breaking the sound barrier. Here we go. That wasn't working out so well, so I switched out the popper for a little bit longer one, and I made this one out of the artificial sinew that I had. So let's see if this is a little bit better. So the final piece of the puzzle is something that I cast a long time ago when I was in college, actually. This is a bronze skull that I made from the same wax that I waxed the whip with. I just drilled a hole in it and tacked the hole to a 1/4 thread. Because this is already 1/4 thread, this becomes an end cap. Tightens on. Might put some spacers in it too. Voila. My whip for my pirate character. Going to Pirate Week in Grand Cayman. I'm going to carry some whips. Pretty neat, huh? Hope you enjoyed the video. Please make sure you like and subscribe to see all my stuff that I create. Thank you guys for watching.